There we go. Good morning, and welcome back to another episode of the DD Geopolitics live stream. I am your host, Sarah, and we are finally joined once again by Larry Johnson, former CIA officer with experience in national security and intelligence. His expertise spans areas such as counterterrorism, international security, and analysis, making him a very sought-after commentator. We are going to get some of the stuff the mandatory formalities out of the way in Ukraine. Sure. Then we'll get our tinfoil hat on later and get down into the rabbit hole. So we'll give it to John, my co-host, and take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah. And Larry, it's great to have you on. Was very excited to talk to you because I've been following your work and analysis on Ukraine for some time. And so I wanted to start off by asking you about the war in Ukraine. We are now almost 2.5 years into the war, if you can believe that. The U.S. has pumped well over $100 billion into the war in Ukraine, while Russia has consolidated its gains and has continued making some incremental progress along critical axes on the front lines. And maybe even more importantly, I think, the people of the Donbass, Crimea, etc., many people have accepted the legitimacy of the Russian government, yet we still hear this crazy and volatile rhetoric from U.S. officials who want Ukraine to keep fighting. And of course, Zelensky keeps going around and begging for money from Western governments to sustain the war effort. So I wanted to know, I wanted to hear a little bit from you about what you think the goal of the United States and NATO is for Ukraine ahead of the 2024 elections. And what do you make of the NATO summit? Do you have any reactions where NATO leaders continue to talk about Ukraine's path to membership?
Yeah, let's put it this way. The West is in general disarray. Their plan, which was carefully laid out, or so they thought, was to use Ukraine as battering ram against Russia, and that it would ultimately cause either a political and or military fissure within Russia, split them apart, and allow the West to come in and, it's harsh language, but I mean every word of it, to rape Russia, to literally take it and despoil it of everything it has. It seems crazy, but the West keeps coming up with excuses to try to destroy Russia. Well, their plan failed, and there is no way to turn this around. This is like, if you've ever been on a long airplane trip, you reach a point in the flight where you've reached the apex, and now you start descending towards where you're going to land. Plane's coming in for a landing. When that landing will take place, I can't say. It's been clear that the Russian general staff, they have their own table in mind. They're not following my timetable. But nothing that you need in order to sustain combat on the Ukrainian side adds up. They don't have effective artillery. They're limited in those supplies, and the West has no ability to resupply them and to sustain that supply over time. So there's that limit. The barrels on these guns, as much as they're fired, those have to be replaced. The West doesn't have a factory standing by cranking those things out. This isn't like World War II where, General Motors was spitting out dozens of tanks a day. They don't have air defense. The air defense systems that the United States has provided, and to a lesser extent that which Britain and Germany have provided, are getting blown up, and they can't stop any of the hypersonic missiles, despite making claims that they can, take down everything. So no air defense. Their fixed-wing aircraft, combat air, very, very limited, and it keeps getting shot down. They're supposed to get some F-16s. All that done is energized all the Russian pilots because they're offering them like 15 million rubles for the first one to down an F-16. So this is like people lining up to buy the big winning lottery ticket. You would not want to be a Ukrainian pilot with that kind of price tag on your tail. So it's just, and then the most important one of all, manpower. They, it's one thing to go grab some guy off the street and throw him in the back of a truck and then take him someplace, dress him up in a uniform, give him a gun, say, go get him, Tiger. Number one, you got to think that that guy's going to be more interested in self-preservation than in sacrificing himself for the cause of whatever. So more likely to surrender. If he does stay on the line to fight, doesn't know what the hell to do. Yeah, because it's not a one-man competition. These are supposed to be military units that work in a coordinated fashion, and the only way you learn to do that is by exercising, practicing, training. They don't have that. And now, if you're talking about how to use a mortar, how to fire an artillery piece, how to drive a tank, how to drive a Bradley, how to operate a drone in combat conditions, all of that requires training. None of that's just, read the instructions and then go do it. So when you put all that together, there's nothing you can put as a positive check mark for Ukraine. Just to say, oh man, if only they focus on this, they could turn this around, or they could create a stalemate. No, they're not. They're not going to create a stalemate. And people that are indulging in that kind of delusional fantasy need to wake up. So Russia is just increasing the pressure, and one of these days, like water building up against the dam's going to break. Russians are going to flood through, and this thing will end quickly.
Yeah, and we've been saying this for 2 years, right? The better part of 2 years. The trajectory that we're seeing is exactly what we've been saying, what we've been warning, which is why we've been adamant about negotiations and trying to pressure, at least in the United States, trying to pressure our officials to see the wisdom, at least, in engaging in some level of good faith negotiations with the Russian government. And that gets me to my second question is, it looks like, we'll get to Trump later, but it looks like Trump is in pole position when it comes to the presidential election in 2024.
Right.
And there is some optimism in some segments of the U.S. Politics that Trump will engage in negotiations with Vladimir Putin. This might be an opportunity to bring the war to an end and have some type of lasting peace. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the impact if Trump is elected, and the prospects for peace there. Kind of coming from your background as a CIA analyst, is this really something that we can be hopeful about, or is the trajectory that the West and NATO has set when it comes to Ukraine, this path of escalation, is that kind of baked into the cake?
But they've set, let's call it, the verbal path of escalation, talking real tough. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Okay, do it. We're going to supply more air defense, except we can't make it. As soon as we get it made, boy, we're going to be supplying that. When you realize that Lockheed Martin, as an example, I think it was last year, in the entire year, they made a total of 550 Patriot missiles. Now, so that's a missile that goes into the launcher. And that launcher, I think every Patriot missile launcher will hold 16 missiles. Okay? So basically, you've made enough missiles to load up 30 launchers in that 1 year. So every time you got an inbound target on that launcher, it'll fire 2 missiles. On December 28th or 29th last year in Ukraine, in that one day, Russia fired 224 missiles. If the Patriot batteries had been operational and had been firing all their launchers at those 224 missiles, you didn't have to do advanced algebra to figure this one out. That means they fired almost 450 Patriot missiles. So in one day, Russia, through the amount it can fire, can actually eat up almost the entire supply of what Lockheed Martin can produce in an entire year. So they're going to escalate? Good luck with that. How does, it's like I said, it's divorced from reality. And that's, and you'd asked actually in your first question about the NATO summit, and this ties back into this. So one of the key outcomes of the NATO summit is by God, we're going to also fight China. And, we're going, China? What? Are the Chinese invading? I mean, we've got some more Chinese restaurants, I'm sure, in Munich and Paris and Italy. But last I checked, I haven't seen any Chinese paratroopers or Chinese Marines or Chinese soldiers parading around on the beaches.
Well, they called China a critical enabler of the Russian war effort. Well, this just seems like kind of lunatic language.
Yeah. Well, speaking of critical enablers, what the hell do you call NATO with respect to Ukraine? Okay. So, and only for our enabling efforts, we've gotten probably close to 1 million Ukrainians killed. Maybe the number is 700,000, but enough have been killed that serious questions raised about the future population replacement in Ukraine. They could literally die out as a country, just nobody left to reproduce. So, so NATO wanting to expand into Southeast Asia. Now, you two are too young to remember SEATO. Have you ever heard of SEATO? SEATO. Okay, no, and that's all right. I don't expect you to. SEATO stood for the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, set up in 1954, so basically 70 years ago, and it was comprised of Australia, New Zealand, Philippines, I think South Korea, and Thailand. And it was based in Thailand. Well, at that time, the threat was it was set up to stop international communism. Into that domino theory, it was going to take over the world. We got to stop it. And basically, SEATO was an extension of NATO into Southeast Asia for the express purpose of starting the Vietnam War, protecting France's colonial empire. Well, guess what? The United States loses that war and in 1975 pulls out, and 1975 also marks the end of SEATO. Well, all this latest NATO summit did, let's call this son of SEATO, or SEATO 2.0, except they're not calling it SEATO, but that's what they're talking about. Only this time, they want to fight China. Now, we couldn't handle Vietnam, and we sure as hell are having trouble with Ukraine, and we can't stop the Houthis. Who in their right mind thinks we got a fighting chance against the Chinese? I don't. So it comes out of this. So what you've got is this mixture of wild escalatory language. I just heard Keir Starmer talking about, yeah, we're going to do this for Ukraine and we're going to do that for Ukraine. And you just want to grab him by the lapels and say, hey, you stupid sot. You can't even fill up a Wembley Stadium with your army because you're so small. What are you talking about? Your steel mills have closed because of your green policies. You don't have the wherewithal. You can't even get your damn aircraft carriers out of port. They keep breaking down once they start to see. And yet you're going to go toe-to-toe with Russia? Wake up. Sorry, I shouldn't rant this early.
No, that's great. It was good to learn about SEATO. Son of SEATO sounds like son of Satan, which might be,
I don't like that. Yeah, it's not good.
Be appropriate.
Yeah.
For bringing about the end times, I guess.
Well, yeah. There's things I start assuming that people know things, and I sit back and recognize, if you're under the age of 50, you probably never heard of SEATO because they don't teach it in school.
I mean, I think Sarah and I have both done quite a bit to try and kind of educate ourselves on Cold War history, but we both, our political consciousness was formed well after the Cold War. So
I think John wanted to touch on terrorism, because we did just talk about enablers. So let's talk about enabling terrorism, strategic terrorism, maybe.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great topic, because as we discussed, the U.S. is losing its ability to kind of just bully these countries around, and we've, as we just talked about, its efforts in Ukraine are not going the way that they wanted. Obviously, we don't even have the capacity to actually fight a war with China, right? If we did, we would
Right.
have to rely on Chinese manufacturing to industrialize for that war. So, kind of definitionally, it's impossible. But one of the things that we've seen the U.S. employ more and more recently, at least this is what it seems like to me, is these types of destabilization efforts in other parts of the world, whether we're looking at the terrorist attacks in Iran, whether we're talking about the Crocus Music Hall attacks in Russia, the continued kind of stoking of ethnic and religious animosities all across the world. I would love for you to maybe talk a little bit about what you think the U.S. strategy is right now when it comes to enabling terrorism and the role that our intelligence agencies play to those ends.
Well, you used the fascinating word, strategy. Strategy implies that somebody sat down and thought through goals and objectives and said, here's where we want to be, and how do we get from point A to point B? U.S. doesn't have any damn strategy. They're just like keep throwing Jello at the wall and saying, God, why doesn't that stick? Let's try it again. So the use of terrorism as a tool of the intelligence agency, my old outfit, goes back to 1948, 49, started in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
So early on in the immediate aftermath, so we win World War II. So U.S. believes it won World War II, ignores the role that the Soviet Union played in that. And early on, they take in as one of the military, the Army intelligence takes in this guy named Reinhard Gehlen.
Gehlen, yeah.
G-E-H.
Berlin CIA office.
Yeah. And so Gehlen had headed up the German intelligence, and he claimed he had all this juicy stuff. And there's, I forget the name of this author, a young guy. He's just written sort of a revisionist history of World War II, claiming that, oh my God, Stalin was keen on conquering the world. And his source for that, Reinhard Gehlen.
We've been seeing a lot of people using Nazis as a source lately.
And it's like, Gehlen came and says, oh, yes, we interviewed this Soviet officer, and he was right there at this dinner with Stalin, and this is exactly what Stalin said. Yeah, you believe that? Man, I got a bridge to sell you. And it turns out that actually Gehlen's primary source of information looks like was a controlled Soviet NKVD asset that was based in the Balkans, who happened to be Jewish, of all things, a whole nother twist to that. But anyway, so the United States gets Gehlen in there, and Gehlen convinces us that, hey, we got to destroy the Soviets. And so that's why we start backing and funding this guerrilla movement and insurgency, terrorists, if you want to call it that, in Ukraine. The Soviets finally put a lot of it down by 1955. But by then, the United States was overthrowing the governments in Guatemala and Iran. We're involved with Greece, with Turkey. I mean, it was around the world. So this is not a new phenomenon. It's like the same old playbook. Or it's like the Julia Child's cookbook. Okay. Yes. Where is our casserole chaos? Here it is. And they mix all the ingredients, pay the front groups, train some people, supply some arms, and voila, a color revolution, or whatever you want to call it. And it's the fact that Russia in the post-Soviet era faced off against a Chechen insurgent movement that was basically funded by Western intelligence interests. For again, the purpose is to destroy Russia. The West has this obsession about destroying Russia. Can't get it out of our brain, and it's so out of touch with reality. But they keep trying. So, the Crocus attack, the attack in Dushanbe, it will not be the last. The terrorism, I've been a quote terrorism analyst going on 40 years, and my view, I finally come to the conclusion that a lot of terrorism it's a political creation that Western nations use, not strictly Western nations, but you use it to eliminate political opposition or to justify expansion of military budgets and such. Uh, as an example, a little bit of a side of a diversion, but Hamas is routinely described as this massive terrorist group. Oh my God, they're doing so much terrorism. And I kept hearing that, and I could not, because I used to keep track of terrorist incidents every year and you write them down. So I went, and lo and behold, I found that the Russian foreign ministry, the Israeli foreign ministry, so it's the official Israeli government site, actually has a record of every Palestinian terrorist attack going back to the year 2000. And I started counting, I went through it and started counting them up. Over a 24-year period, you're talking about 681 what they describe as terrorist incidents. But then you have to break them down. Okay, what are we talking about? Are we talking about mass suicide bombings, mass shootings, blowing up airplanes? What are we talking about? Well, it turned out like something like 75% of everything that they had listed were one-on-one violence, basically settlers getting shot or stabbed by angry Palestinians who are losing their homes. That's really what it was. Of those 681 terrorist attacks listed by the Israeli Foreign Ministry, less than 100 were ascribed to Hamas. So over a 24-year period, Hamas was maybe doing what would be called 5 terrorist attacks a year, and those 5 terrorist attacks a year were usually, low-scale violence, not organized attacks, not like the attack on the USS Cole that bin Laden did, or the simultaneous bombings at the embassies in East Africa. And yet, for the public consumption, Hamas is a terrorist organization. Well, frankly, no, it's not. And so, but I'm just explaining how this thing gets so politicized to put the label on it in order to justify how governments react to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in the United States, you have people that inhabit more of this, they would consider a political middle ground, or even, quote, the left, where they will, mourn for the suffering of the Palestinians on one hand, but then they'll also say, well, yeah, Hamas is also a terrorist organization and they need to go.
Right.
It just shows you how effective our country has been in shifting the Overton window one direction. But kind of going back to the question about, the lack of strategy, so to speak, of maybe our intelligence agencies and the motivations behind different forms of terrorism that we see abroad. One thing that I've noticed is, of course, we're seeing the development of BRICS. We're seeing the development of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. A few new nations have signed on to be observers. And in my mind, this is also something that has to be in the minds of the intelligence agencies and politicians, of course, in the United States, is doing whatever they can to interrupt and break up this cohesion that we're starting to see emerge, particularly along the Eurasian landmass. And so I don't think it's a surprise that we see, a lot of these terrorist attacks happen in places like Dagestan, the Caucasus, and so forth, that are kind of critical junctures for connecting countries like Russia and Iran and Russia and China, and so on. So I don't know if you have any thoughts or musings about that.
Well, I don't think the U.S. really has a clue what's going on right now. Now, Donald Trump, to his credit, in this recent interview with Bloomberg, he just observed, he says, look, when I was president, North Korea, Iran, Russia, and China were all sort of doing their own thing and weren't united as a bloc. Now, Biden, in the last 3.5 years, has managed to unite them as really a cohesive bloc working together. You two may be barely old enough. You remember the company Kodak?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
How do you think I am, Larry? I'm pretty old.
Yeah. And like I said, none of you are breaking 50. Okay.
No.
So, yeah. So, because, you go back, Kodak was a dominant company.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
huge,
major. And it, language, hey, a Kodak moment, it became part of our lexicon. It describes something. And then boom, gone. We're, you no longer have to load film into a camera and wind it up and then worry about getting over, because the digital age showed up, completely changed it. What's taking place right now with BRICS and with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO, with this relatively new, the International Russophile Movement, MIR, I've been a part of, and these other international, let's call them multinodal organizations. And I'm going to use multinodal as recommended by Chaz Freeman. I think he's exactly right. It's a more accurate term than multipolar.
Yeah.
Because multipolar sounds, it's just it's a geometric linear thing. Multinodal provides more of a living, breathing organism that's moving out in a variety of different directions. And so here's the Western system based upon International Monetary Fund, World Bank, World Trade Organization, the United Nations, of course, and then sort of the derivatives of the United Nations that we have, the version of the UN in, here in North America, South America. And the United States basically been able to control that. All of a sudden, here comes BRICS. And I think when BRICS, when they first started, they were looking somehow at how to get out from under the economic thumb of the West. But now all of a sudden, man, that thing has accelerated. And it's been accelerated because of the Western attempt to punish first Russia and now China as a result of them resisting Western attempts to encroach upon Russia and China. And as Russia and China have come together, man, all the cool kids are showing up wanting to be a part of their club. It used to be everybody wanted to be part, sit at the lunch table with the United States and the Europeans. Now that's not the case. It's the outsiders are now sort of becoming the insiders, the ones to attract attention. And Pepe Escobar, and I did an interview with him, recorded it, and we spent an hour about talking about this, because the West is so damn clueless, so arrogant that BRICS, I hold my nose, that kind of thing. It's going to amount to nothing. They can't do anything without our dollars. And I'm thinking, can anybody name what was the primary currency of the Roman Empire? Who knows? There was a time when it was important and people gave a damn. And then there came a time when there wasn't.
Yeah. And
I don't care how important the dollar is right now, there can come a day when all of a sudden people go, dollars? Yeah, I'm running low on toilet paper. I'll take a stack. So what's happening with BRICS is the West doesn't get it. But they are going to try. I agree with you, John. I think that we can expect them to try to destroy and disrupt. Once they wake up and go, oh my God, this is a threat. We got to stop this. And it'll be too late.
Yeah, I mean, you already see so much, like you said, it's so arrogant. And even the way that it's portrayed in the mainstream media is like, oh, yeah, BRICS is kind of maybe this burgeoning thing. It's like a conspiracy, but it doesn't really have any real significance. But no, this has real significance on the ground. I mean, countries are beginning to orient themselves based on these aligning. I like that multinodal.
We can't change multipolar to multinodal. We already have our slogan. I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to keep using.
We're gonna reprogram the brain.
You're right. Yeah, but I mean, it's so clear that this is having real material impacts. Like when countries like Venezuela, which are extremely rich in resources, are orienting more toward countries like China and Russia. I mean, this has real geopolitical significance. And like you said, I think it might already be too late. But certainly we're behind the curve.
Well, and just the numbers, we start adding up the numbers. So you got China, you got India, you got Brazil, South Africa, Russia, Iran, Egypt, Indonesia's lining up, Malaysia's lining up, Vietnam's lining up, Turkey's lining. All of a sudden, the time, the era when the G7 represented the majority of the economic activity in the world, now it's going to be in a minority position, and not at some distant time in the future. Now, and it's only going to accelerate. It's going to get worse in terms of U.S. ability to control and dominate. And many overseas will say, "Thank God, about time."
You mentioned Trump. I'm ready to get started. So let's.
Yeah.
We're gonna say I'll use Lavrov to segue us into Trump real quick.
Mr. Minister, how do you foresee Russia-U.S. relations if former President Trump is elected, particularly with his vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance, who has commented extensively about Ukraine? I asked you this question in January, but things have changed, and now he is the nominee of the GOP. Thank you.
Well, perhaps something has changed, but it's not our position. You are well aware that we do not interfere in other states' domestic affairs. This includes the United States. We worked with President Trump. We had contacts. He met with President Putin. He hosted me a few times in the White House. Irrespective of his mindset at the time, during the Trump period, the sanctions war began. Obama began this war. Let's state that to be fair. But under Trump, there were more and more sanctions that were imposed. Economic sanctions, diplomatic sanctions were imposed. However, at that time, as I mentioned already, dialogue was underway between us and Washington at the highest levels. Right now, there is no such dialogue. There was a meeting in June 2021 between Presidents Putin and Biden in Geneva, but after the start of our special military operation, after we explained exhaustively the fact that we have no choice but to defend our security interests, but to defend those people who the Kiev regime labeled terrorists and who have been bombing. They've been bombing every day. After that, there were no longer any contacts, especially at that level. There are sporadic talks taking place, telephone conversations at times. The head of the CIA, Bill Burns, met with the director of the Domestic Intelligence Service last year on neutral territory. There are some telephone conversations at various levels. However, when it comes to substance, we have not seen anything substantive happening here.
I think that's pretty interesting. Lavrov has multiple times said they've asked him prior, who do you want to win the United States election? And he said it doesn't matter because the foreign policy never changes. What do you feel? How do you feel about his answer to that question now that we know Trump is most likely going to win?
Yeah, I actually think if you get Lavrov or Sergei Rybkov aside, and over a beer or a nice glass of vodka, and just chatting as friends, they would admit that they think that there's a better chance of having a sane discussion with somebody in a Trump administration as opposed to this current group of inmates that are running the insane asylum. Mm-hmm. It is, but I've heard the same message from Rybkov that Lavrov was saying, and this was it was a private meeting, but I'm not divulging anything that is not now public, which was, we don't know who to talk to. There is no system in place for having contact with these people. And, it's shocking because when you go back to even the depths, the lowest points during the Cold War, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, United States and Russia and the then Soviets were talking. There were conversations with Brezhnev and Andropov and all that old Gromyko, the old crowd. Not now. And so if you're not going to have that kind of dialogue and an attempt to sort of reason things out, it just increases the risk of a confrontation. That's what makes it so damn dangerous right now. And, frankly, there's signs they're going to try to rerun the Trump is a puppet of Putin program again. Oh, yeah, Russia's interfering in our election. And for once, I wish the international press would say to the United States, shut the hell up. What do you call the National Endowment for Democracy, which is in almost every country, and Radio Free Europe, and all of your social media posts, and all these different front organizations you fund and put in other countries in order to influence their domestic politics? You're the biggest goddamn hypocrite in the world. You're the biggest interferer, not Russia, not China. You are. Cut it out. But, that won't happen. That's just my private fantasy.
Don't reveal all of your private fantasies.
Yeah.
Let's get into the assassination attempt, the failed assassination attempt. Go ahead, John.
Did something happen?
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, okay.
Something happened this week, apparently. We're just now hearing about it. No.
Yeah. Oh.
This is of course, the obvious story that's been dominating the headlines, the Trump assassination attempt.
Yeah.
According to a lot of people on Twitter and on social media, it's shaking up the domestic political landscape in 2024 elections. People are saying now Trump is a shoo-in. It's at least fueled that narrative that Trump is a lock to win the election.
Right.
Interested to get your analysis of the attack, and can you talk a little bit about some of the intelligence capabilities that the government uses to prevent such attacks? And then I have a couple of follow-up questions, because I would like to know your thoughts if it would / should have been stopped if this was indeed a lone rogue shooter acting individually. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Well, so just so you understand my background, I am somewhat qualified to talk about this. So one of my jobs at State Department was overseeing the anti-terrorism assistance training program, provided a series of courses to foreign police and foreign governments. And one of those was executive protection. So it was involved with overseeing the curriculum, making sure they had the right curriculum. I've also conducted security assessments and advanced works of with the Secret Service. One of my good friends, who I'll be interviewing tomorrow, really helped set up a lot of the Secret Service curriculum and training and standards, what they're supposed to use. So, and I've done assessments. Bottom line, this was one of the most colossal fuck-ups in history, according to incompetence. And then let's make this or this was a deliberate attempt to kill Trump by members of, let's call it, the deep state. Who in the deep state? You got lots of suspects. It's like that Kevin Spacey movie, The Usual Suspects. Why do I say that? Oh, the list of things that went wrong that day. Number one, Trump's regular Secret Service detail was told, hey, take the weekend off. You guys have been working really, really hard. So we're going to bring in the third team, which is literally what they did. And what do I mean by third team? I mean people who are not trained and qualified to do the job, number one. So they bring in the third teamers. Whenever the Secret Service goes out to a site like this, they have to do what's called advanced work. And part of the advanced work is you identify the areas where a sniper could operate, and you lock those down. You don't say, well, let's hope that nobody gets up there. No, you lock them down. And how far out? If you're in an outdoor area like this, you want to go out 1,000 yards. 500 yards minimum. They didn't do that. At least over on that particular area where the shooter was, they didn't do that. They didn't lock it down. They had ample reports of some suspicious activity and a potential threat. When you have that, you pull the principal off the stage, or you don't let them go on the stage. They didn't do that. Was that a failure in communications? Well, then that is another colossal screw up that the guy in charge or the gal in charge, I don't know which it was, is supposed to make sure that they have interoperative communications, that what the state police are helping and the local police are helping can communicate with the Secret Service. So you're not having to go through like 3 or 4 different cell phones with 3 or 4 different numbers and 3 or 4 different people answering. If it all comes to a central communication where it can be controlled. When you've got federal, state, and local personnel, how do you recognize who's who? Well, one of the things you do, police departments do it. Hell, even the Ukrainian army, as bad as it is right now, they do the same thing. And the Russian army, they wear a colored band on them. You've seen them, like the blue band on the Ukrainians and the white band on the Russians. Why? So that way they can look quickly and know, hey, I'm not shooting that guy. He's on my team. He's on Team Russia or he's on Team Ukraine. They didn't do that. So there's one possible explanation that the reason they didn't shoot this kid previously is that they couldn't identify for sure that he was not a local, part of the local state police. So that was a possibility. There is some bad information out there suggesting there was only that one counter sniper team that you saw on the roof, the guy with the tripod. There were actually 2. And the other counter sniper team, if you're looking at President Trump, if he's facing you, that the one that everyone's seen is up to his right, your left as you're looking at him. The other counter sniper team that really hasn't been photographed or the pictures appear of, I've seen one picture, was to Trump's left, which would be your right as you're looking at the stage. They're the ones that took the shot. They're the ones that killed the kid. Now, they have the authorization, according to Secret Service standard operating procedure. If you see somebody with a gun that poses a threat, you don't have to stop and ask permission to shoot. You can shoot. Now, it'd be interesting to see if there was some back and forth going on. Also, that the counter sniper team that was up on the roof immediately to Trump's right, to his right and behind him, their vision of the roof where this kid was crawling up was partially blocked by a tree, whereas the other sniper team, the counter sniper team, had a direct line of sight. So, it's just, like I said, it's one screw up after another. Now, was it deliberate? Timing of it, 2 days before the Republican National Convention? You think it was just the idea of some 20-year-old kid said, "Oh, I don't have anything better to do. I could be serving Jell-O at the nursing home," or "No, I'll go shoot President Trump. That's what I'm going to do today."
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you about that point, Larry, because that's kind of the narrative, at least at this point, that's being presented by the mainstream media, that this individual 20-year-old, who was bullied and had these problems. But what is the likelihood that there was no knowledge of an impending attack? I mean, we have information now that apparently there were bombs in the car that he'd put together. Obviously, he was armed with a rifle. And they're saying that he did all of this stuff on encrypted messaging services to organize and execute this. But what is the likelihood that there was actually no knowledge of this impending attack, and couldn't a lone individual have really pulled this off?
There's always that possibility, but I don't think this was a lone wolf, despite what they're saying. And candidly, I don't trust anything the FBI or the Secret Service will put out about this investigation. You remember the kid, the Air Force kid up in Massachusetts that got arrested a year ago for, he was releasing all these classified documents.
Of course I know. They blamed me for it.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, you were part of that.
Yeah.
Maybe we should end this conversation.
No,
But when the FBI went into his room, they pointed out he had all these assault rifles. They were airsoft guns, for God's sake. An airsoft gun is a gun that shoots a soft pellet. It stings like hell if it hits you, but it doesn't kill you. It could put your eye out. Okay, maybe that. But the fact that they would lie about those actual weapons, so-called weapons that were in this kid's room, just tell me they'll say anything except maybe the actual truth about what was going on here. Because this was not the kid had to find a spot to know where to set up to shoot. How did he know where to set up? Then he had to know that he'd need to get up to the roof. He'd need a ladder of a certain size. How did he know that? And then how did he know he's going to be able to carry his rifle out in the open across an open area? He supposedly walked almost a mile to get there without anybody going, hey, WTF? Who are you? None of that. It's just the things, and I got to tell you, one of my retired Secret Service buddies, talking to him last night, and I saw an interview he did on Sunday, and maybe it was Monday. It was really early on, and so he was still leaving. I don't want to jump to too many conclusions, and this looks bad, but maybe there's a good explanation. Last night I talked to him. This stinks. This is bad. There's no explanation for it. He's now come around to where I am on this too. This is, I think candidly, this was an organized plot to kill Trump. Thank God the people that organized it are a bunch of morons. But they tried to set it up in a way that it could succeed and then be blamed on some lone wolf kid that was going to be conveniently killed. I mean, he should have been killed. I'm not saying he should have survived. If you're out there taking shots at people, that's the counter sniper job. Shoot him before he can shoot anybody else. But the amount of misinformation also that was immediately being churned out. I was doing an interview with Nima, and in the midst of the interview was a retired SEAL team buddy of mine sent me a note. Hey, they were saying the guy is Chinese. So I mentioned that on air, and I thought, Chinese?
Larry.
Well, I wasn't saying this is honest to God truth. It's the Chinese Xi Jinping's revenge. No, I wasn't saying. But then yesterday when they came out and said, oh no, it was the Iranians.
Oh my God, yeah, I wanted to go through some of the conspiracy theories with you and rapid fire because we've gotten so many. We've been through the Chinese, the Jews, the Iranians, and I think we're in the RNC, and RNC tried to kill him because they want Nikki Haley to run.
Well, I can't rule that out. I can't rule out, but in terms of the people that have access and control of the Secret Service, it's on the Democrat side of the House, not the Republican side. But the screw ups on this are just, they're so big. It's tough to just say it's sheer incompetence. But at a minimum, the woman who's running Cheadle, who's running the Secret Service right now, she needs to be fired immediately.
And so I flashed the diagram, and I'm going to show it here, and maybe you can walk us through it. You could have already described what the situation was.
Yeah.
But here's the diagram here. On your left, you see where the gunman was located, and then where Trump was, 410 feet. I mean, that's less than 200 yards.
Yeah.
You mentioned that your perimeter you'd want 1,000 yards, at least 500. So yeah, I kind of talk about maybe the specifics of this setup, how close this actually was, and kind of give us
that's really close. Now the good news is the kid was using a rifle, an AR-15 platform, which is they call it an assault rifle, but it's not the kind of rifle you use for shooting at long distance. And the round it carries is what's known as a 5.56. So the bullet basically is about the same, at least the diameter of the bullet's about the same as a .22 caliber, which is a very small bullet. And he was using an optic that had a red dot, but it did not have magnification. The thing with magnification is you can blow it up at a distance, so it makes it easier for you to shoot it. If you go back to that diagram, if you look where you can see where Trump on stage was, and then behind him there are 3 buildings. So the picture we've had of the red box on the left is on top of that white roof. That's where one team of counter snipers was situated. And you can barely see it, but if you draw a straight line from their box to the red box where they say gunman, you can see a tree. And so that tree was partially obscuring their vision. Whereas on the far right of that picture where it says Secret Service counter snipers, that far right box was where the guys who actually took the shot, because they had a direct line of sight and were not excluded or obscured. Still, what this picture shows, on the roof of every one of those buildings, Secret Service should have had some armed counter sniper personnel up there. They didn't. They were completely uninhabited, and they had oversight and access to where Trump was going to be standing. That is just criminal negligence.
Still like confused, but you know what? Let's talk. Yeah.
I mean, it's really mind-boggling that this happened. The timing, like you said, to me, my initial instinct was this is extremely, extremely fishy. We heard all sorts of conspiracy theories. There's some people out there that's saying, oh, Trump staged it so he can attain this kind of status.
But here's the only reason why that could even work. Okay, the savior character arc really worked well for Ronald Reagan, but Trump really didn't need it in this case. He really didn't. He just was kind of smooth sailing. I kind of wanted Larry to kind of debunk why it's highly or if it's likely or unlikely that that Mossad or Israel was involved. I've heard people try to make the case that Israel would rather have Nikki Haley in office than Trump, but I don't really. I said the same thing. I said Trump loves them. So I wanted you to maybe touch on that.
Trump's the only president who moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, something the Israelis have been asking for, 50 years. Every other president from Kennedy through Ronald Reagan and, everyone refused. Trump did it. No, Israel loves Donald Trump. Then that's one of the downsides to him. He comes into office. It's U.S. policy towards Israel won't change. It may even get worse in terms of support. I would like everyone that thinks that this was staged, provide us your name, address. I'll personally fly you out to my range. I'm going to have you sign a waiver first that if you get shot in the head, it's not my fault. And then I'm going to have you go down range, and I'm going to try to shoot you in the left ear. Only I'll shoot from 70 yards. Okay? And we'll see what you think about being staged, because I guarantee you, probably 80% of you will die because I'll miss a little bit to the right. Not intentionally, but I mean, that's so goddamn stupid. Really? These people, oh, you had a red capsule in his ear. Oh, for God's sake, folks. That was a real gunfight. I also saw one other account that's circulating saying, oh, the gunfight went on for 26 seconds. Talk about gaslighting. You can watch the video. It is 6 seconds total of shooting from the time the first shot by the shooter to the last shot by the Secret Service counter sniper team. And then these people, oh, there was a second gunman. Okay, where's the bullet? I mean, if the second gunman was the one who was really going to make the shot, so he missed, and I think the kid was encouraged to do a mission, and the people that thought he could do it from there, it was a reasonable bet. That's not an impossible shot to make with a red dot. but he failed. And he would have succeeded if Trump simply had not turned his head. When Trump went like that and crack, and then, thought it was like, you thought he was getting stung by a bee, and then all of a sudden realized it was gunshots. And I give Trump credit for presence of mind that he got his ass down on the deck real quick.
I also want to comment on Trump's absolute insanity that he stands back up and fist pumps and says, fight, fight, fight. So just like, that was it. Once he did that, I looked and I said, that's the election. That's it. That's it. What an incredible moment. I do want to get your opinion on JD Vance, because he's a really big hot topic now that he's officially accepted his nomination. What do we think about him? Is there any background to him? But I do want to play a short video clip. It's only 30 seconds.
As somebody who doesn't like Trump myself, the elites were right about Donald Trump, right? I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him.
He's the best president of my lifetime, and he revealed the corruption in this country like nobody else.
I can't stomach Trump. I think that he's noxious and is leading the white working class to a very dark place. I think that he was a good president. I think he made a lot of good decisions for people.
I take it you're not a Trump supporter from what I've read. Am I right? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I didn't vote for Trump.
All around, he was a great president. I'm 37 years old. Certainly the best president of my lifetime.
Yeah. So he said some stuff when he was 31 years old. I bet neither of you ever said anything stupid that you regret when you were 31.
How do you know I'm already 31?
Well, I assumed it was like last year. Okay, that's what I meant.
I say stupid things every day.
So me too. I'm not even 31 yet, but
it'd be one thing if Vance came out and said, "Well, I never said that." Okay, but he came out and said, "Yeah, I said it. I was wrong." He said, "I didn't watch what Trump did, and it turned out different." He actually turned out he meant what he said about trying to help the working class. So, the fact that guy says, "I was wrong," yeah, those are rare words you hear come from the mouth of most politicians. Wrong? No, you misheard me, or you didn't understand. No, he said I was wrong. Made a mistake. Okay, so move from there. Vance, by virtue of his youth, does not have a lot of experience, particularly in the foreign policy front. He's still repeating what I'll call some of the old theology that's out there as part of being in the Republican, well, not just Republican, the foreign policy mainstream. But that said, his instincts are right about we don't need to be fighting all these wars overseas, number one. But number two, he comes out of a genuine Jerry Springer background, okay? His family history would have made 2 or 3 episodes on the Jerry Springer show, all right? With mom being a heroin addict and grandma using the F word, threatening to run over his friends. Yeah, you could have had some entertainment with that, but he doesn't disavow his roots. He didn't become some arrogant snob like, well, I went to Yale and he sort of stayed in touch with his, let's call it his working class roots. So when you think about it, he's the first person we've had nominated as the vice president that comes with that storyline. And I include Harry Truman in that because Truman was part of the corrupt Pendergast machine in Kansas City. J.D. Vance didn't come out of any corrupt political machine. So this is it's sort of interesting to have him. Is he going to be a perfect solution? No, but I at least like the fact that he thinks the war in Ukraine is stupid, and he thinks we were too far invested in overseas military activities.
What do we have to worry about Nikki Haley getting a cabinet seat and her ties to defense?
She pissed all over the birthday cake during her presidential run. They're not inviting her to the party.
He said he would give her a role. What do you think that entails? Just something
cleaning toilets, cleaning toilets at the White House. Yeah, give her something. Yeah, we think you'll be good at this. No, I don't. I don't.
Well, I do want to know what your predictions are coming up. At least it's a general idea. Ukraine, Iran, and then the U.S.
I think the war with Ukraine is probably going to wind down by the fall, simply because once it becomes apparent that Trump and Vance are going to win, Zelensky, the news that that they failed to kill Trump for Vladimir Zelensky. He was like one of those guys that has to stand to guard a free kick in football, only he has to put his hands behind his head instead of covering his crotch. He got kicked where it hurts. Okay, the support in Europe's going to start falling apart. They're already freaking out. The real question is going to be: will Joe Biden be on the ballot by November? I don't think so. There are strong rumors afoot that he'll announce his resignation this weekend. We'll see.
Right, with the COVID thing, do you think the COVID stuff is related and all of that, kind of like getting him out of the public eye, get him like, let's figure out what we can do?
They'll probably come up with a narrative that he got COVID and then he's got complications and he's too ill to continue and he's sad. Now the question is, does he stay in office or does he turn things over to Kamala? And then that leaves the Democrats with the dilemma of who the hell is going to be in charge. Because if they don't keep Kamala and Biden, or at least Kamala, then all the money that's been raised for the Biden-Kamala campaign can't be by whoever they put up, Michelle Obama, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, Peter Pan, God knows who they want.
Peter Pan.
So yeah, it's gonna be a mess.
Just reanimate like the dead body of JFK or something. They'll just put him back in office.
Oh, they'd go. Well, they wouldn't go for that. He's too damn conservative for them. He at least knew what a woman was. Knew many of them to be precise.
Yeah, we forgot. Well, Larry, it's been a pleasure as always. Why don't you tell us where to find you and what you're up to and what you're looking forward to?
Well, Sarah, John, I appreciate you guys having me on. People can find me at sonar21.com. And then that has all the links to everything else I do.
John, final thoughts, closings?
Been a very interesting conversation. Love getting to hear from you, Larry. I learned quite a bit from the Cold War to basically the situation on the ground.
I'd love to have you on again to talk about the Phoenix program.
Hey, you guys get to go impress your friends now. You get there and drop, hey, do you know what CETO is? I do, you don't.
Yeah, I'm going to name drop CETO.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
It's been another great episode of the DD Geopolitics live stream. We will see you tomorrow with Mark Sloboda. Ooh, black pills. Everybody get negative. We had a positive episode today. Tomorrow, we're going to all be depressed. Let's go. Black pill, Mark Sloboda. Have a good